Shortly after I turned 17, I began what my doctors called corrective surgery, a set of surgeries that failed in their professional goals. I had two primary doctors. One was the head of the hospital and an Ilizarro specialist. The other was a hand specialist and the son of the previous head of the hospital. Fun fact, I got kicked out of the hospital when I was 15 for arguing with my hand specialist's dad. The old battle-weary and self-assured head of the hospital wasn't about to tolerate being questioned and called out by a mouthy, disabled 15-year-old punk kid that clearly didn't know charity when he saw it. The argument? The purpose of this old man wanting to chop up my hands. His contention was that the surgery would make me look better. My concern? What good will it do for me to still look different from everyone else if I lose function because of surgery? Can you tell which hand had the surgery? And which one do you think looks better? Fast forward to 17. I was in the hospital getting ready for surgery. How did I go from being kicked out of the hospital to becoming a patient in less than 2 years? It's a long story. Here's the abbreviated version. When I was little, my parents explored surgical options. I remember some of those trips to see doctors. At about age 4 or 5, those trips stopped. When my parents got divorced, 4 of my siblings and I got loaded up on a Winnebago RV and moved 800 miles away from our heartbroken mother. Before I left, 3 families offered to take me in. They knew what condition my family was in at the time. After about a month in that Winnebago, I convinced my dad to let me leave and ease his burdens. I moved in with the family that I knew the least. Their kids were older, and they had the most room for me. And the moment I moved into their house, surgical options were being explored. My foster parents saw the argument that got me kicked out of the hospital. They were sitting right next to me. Their solution? Get me a special religious blessing. It was a big deal. I got a typed up version of it later. In the blessing, I was specifically told to look for opportunities to increase my mobility with my arms and hands. That day, my foster mom said, "See, God wants you to have surgery." When I was born, my parents did a special blessing for my hands. An entire city of our religious community fasted and prayed for me, and then a group of leaders gathered together to give me a blessing. My parents believed that my hands would literally become normal 10-fingered hands because of the blessing. Blessings are given with eyes closed. Imagine what everyone in the room saw when they opened their eyes. My hands looked exactly the way they did before the blessing. But when I showed early signs of being able to use my hands, oh my, the blessing had worked. And my hands were made okay by God himself. Imagine telling a kid that he needed a God to make his hands okay. I also had a large hole in my heart. Another blessing, another seeming miracle. Imaging couldn't see the hole like it did before. 30 years later, a bubble test showed why. My heart developed some webbing over the hole, as people with atrial septal defects often do, but the hole had not closed up, and my blood from my body and my lungs was still mixing and reducing the oxygen percentage of my body. My oxygen content is never at 100%. 2 major issues, 2 major blessings, 2 declared healings. A third blessing was telling me that God wanted me to do surgery. My foster parents were convinced of it. My mother was no longer religious. She was against me having the surgery. My father was already on his way to disappearing out of my life forever. My foster parents were supporting me with living conditions that my parents could not provide. I needed their support. I looked to them as my caregivers. Could I do what I was told? The answer was obviously yes. But the surgery was professionally deemed a failure. My foster parents sat me down several decades later to tell me that they regretted pressuring me into surgery. I permanently lost vital function as a direct result of the surgery. I had to recover for years from the side effects of the drugs and worked for decades to get strength back into my hand. I had 6 pins, 3 that went in one side and out the other, and 3 that went in and were anchored to my bones with screws. These were attached to 12 pounds of titanium, a system of rings and bars and bolts that stretched my arm over 16 months in all kinds of directions. Pain that I still don't know how to describe to people. I have reoccurring nightmares that I did the surgeries again, and I wake up very grateful that they're just dreams. But I do not regret having done those surgeries. It changed my life. It changed the medical community's understanding. I love what I know because of my experiences, and I want to help those I love and those who struggle with their own life circumstances to understand why I love my life, all of my life.